Good evening, I'm Norman MacLeod. This is the STV News at 6 live from Aberdeen. A man's died as a winter storm with winds gusting at more than 100 miles an hour hit Scotland. The lorry driver was killed when his HGV was blown over. The high winds have caused structural damage and hit travel on the roads, railways and at sea. At one point, more than 100,000 homes and businesses were without power. We'll be live in the Highlands shortly, but first Ross Govans reports on the impact of the storm.
As the country was battered by storm-force winds, a driver died when his HGV toppled onto a number of cars in West Lothian. This lorry was lying precariously on the guardrail of the Friarton Bridge in Perth. Motorists were caught in 8 miles of tailbacks as the vehicle was recovered. Bridges, including the Tay, Forth and Skye, were closed. Driving on coastal routes in Orkney was hazardous as waves crashed over the sea defences. Ferries to the Western Isles were cancelled. This car was engulfed by a wave at the harbour at Port Soy in Aberdeenshire. This morning, the entire rail network north of the border was also shut down, leaving passengers stranded.
No, there's nothing else we can do, I don't think, so go back home.
I won't be going to Aberdeen anyway. I was supposed to be there 15 minutes ago.
We've got a group of students going to Edinburgh this afternoon, so I'm just trying to look at the rail situation. So it's affected my plans.
I have to get back to Leeds because I have to go have an hospital appointment tomorrow.
Roads were blocked as hundreds of trees needed to be cleared. Mature trees snapped like twigs as a graphic illustration of the strength of the storm-force winds, which have caused disruption across most of the country, on the roads, on the rail network and at sea. Tonight, engineers are continuing attempts to restore power with overhead cables cut. At its height, more than 100,000 homes and businesses were affected.
Our own weather monitoring systems have been monitoring this weather for the past few days, and we've had over we've got over 1,000 extra staff working to restore power.
We've had gusts of over 100 miles an hour in many areas of Scotland. The Scottish Government Resilience Operation has been in operation all day. The Transport Minister is in the Transport Scotland control room and will be there until the emergency passes.
In Aberdeen, the River Dee burst its banks, while some buildings suffered structural damage. Forecasters say the winds are easing, but the impact could be felt for several days. Ross Govans, STV News.
The storm slammed into Scotland overnight and caused widespread damage, particularly in the Highlands. All day, a major clear-up operation has been underway in the aftermath of the gale. The weather misery was also compounded by flooding, as Nicola McCally reports.
Dramatic scenes at high tide in the Highland capital. A huge surge saw the River Ness burst its banks. Works underway to construct a flood alleviation scheme proved futile against the river as temporary defences were breached by the swell. Sandbags were hastily issued to affected properties, but the tide fell as quickly as it rose. The high river providing the perfect spot for a lunchtime snack for a huge seal.
Well, we always anticipated the potential for flood during the construction works, and the contractor has to take mitigation measures to protect the works. So we were aware that this was coming, and we expected the contractor to take measures to try and reduce the amount of flooding that was related.
Many residents in the Highlands had woken up to or been woken up by strong winds, thunder and lightning. Fallen masonry caused early morning congestion in the Merkinch area of Inverness as police closed off Grant Street to clear up. And it was an unwelcome early wake-up call for some more than others.
5 o'clock this morning, we were hearing the thunder and lightning obviously going through the night, and the wind, and it really got up, and then the next thing we had a huge bang at the front door, and the door just totally in front of us. So woke everybody up, as you can imagine. We thought the house had collapsed or somebody had driven into it. It was massive.
Dozens of roads across the north were affected by the weather. A huge tree strewn across the Kiltarlity Road at Belladrum stopped motorists in their tracks, but help was on hand to make light work of it.
Coming here heading for Dublin Rocket, I just came upon this and it's just kind of put a spanner in the whole works really.
I was woke up by thunder and lightning about back at 5 this morning. I couldn't get back to sleep because it was actually quite loud and the lightning was coming straight in the window.
It started off at 5 o'clock this morning in Beeley at the police station. We went as far as Dram, probably down 15 to 23 so far, I would think. Somewhere about there, like. Oh, pretty dangerous, like.
As the storm subsided throughout the day, the attention now turns to clearing up, with snow and sleet forecast overnight and into tomorrow.
And we can join Nicola now. Nicola, the storm may be over, but the clear-up could take some time.
Well, here at the riverside in Inverness, the levels are largely back to normal for the time of year. However, high tide is due again in the early hours of this morning, so of course authorities will be keeping a close eye on that. Scottish Hydro tell us that tonight there are still around 29,000 customers throughout the whole of the north without power. Their engineers have been working hard throughout the day and they'll be working on into the night to try to restore as many people as they can. They're confident they can do this, but they say they'll try to keep in touch with people who still may be affected into tomorrow. Of course, a day of travel disruption on the ferries. Calmac services have been disrupted. On the trains services, some are starting to get back to normal, but check with your operator if you're planning to travel by rail. And on the airlines, a number of cancellations, so please check again with your airline if you're intending to fly either tonight or into tomorrow. The storm seems to be abating in this part of the world and moving south, but it will be some time yet before everything is cleaned up and back to normal here.
OK, Nicola, thank you. Well, sports coming up, and John Hughes is certainly being made welcome at Inverness.
Yes, he certainly has, Norman. Callie Jags